Night was just giving way to dawn when Lucia Benedetto stepped onto the veranda of Podere dell'Aurora, her family's olive farm tucked into the low, velvet-green hills outside San Felice del Trasimeno. Below her, neat terraces of silvery leaves shimmered under the first brush of sunlight, and the air already smelled of drying grass, damp earth, and the faint peppery perfume unique to ripening Moraiolo olives. It was harvest week, a time of equal parts celebration and exhaustion, and Lucia should have been thinking only of tractors, baskets, and press times, but a splinter of worry lodged behind her ribs. Yesterday, at the milling cooperative, she had tasted something she could not unknow. Luca Manfredi, owner of Verdeoro Foods, had wheeled in 4 stainless steel drums, purporting to contain early harvest extra virgin from his new hillside grove. The colour was right enough, a vibrant green that caught the overhead lights, but the first drop to touch Lucia's tongue told a different story. The oil lacked the trademark ardour, that grassy sting at the back of the throat. Instead, it whispered sunflower and soy, bland impostors hiding beneath a dye-bright hue. Lucia prided herself on the sensitivity of her palate. In her 20s, she had trained in Perugia under a master taster who taught her to sniff out frost damage, fermentation, and chemical deodorization. Since then, her tongue had settled more than one argument between growers, and she never doubted it. Yesterday was no exception. She'd eyed Manfredi's drums with silent suspicion. The cooperative manager, old Ernesto Ricci, noticed her frown and raised a grey brow, but Lucia had pressed her lips together. Without solid proof, a public accusation would do nothing but shred reputations, and maybe cost her friends their jobs. Now, leaning on the veranda rail, she promised herself a quiet investigation, just enough to soothe her conscience. She would poke around after harvest, she thought. Nothing dramatic. Yet even as she formed the plan, a slate-blue truck came rattling up the gravel drive far earlier than any visitor had a right to. The driver jumped out. Marco Ricci, Ernesto's grandson, a lanky boy who sometimes helped in Lucia's groves for pocket money. His face was pale, mouth set in a grim line. He held a small, unlabeled bottle against his chest, as though it might shatter if he loosened his grip. Signora Lucia, he called, skipping over puddles left by last night's storm. Nonna said only you would know. She met him halfway, took the bottle, and pulled out the silicon stopper. A grassy note reached her nose. Good, but not conclusive. She tilted the vial, letting a drop fall onto her tongue. The first hit tasted fine, yet as the liquid slid down her throat, a waxy hollowness bloomed and clung there, a ghost of cheap salad oil. "How many drums like this?" she asked. 20, maybe more, delivered at dawn. He bribed the night guard to let him in. He? Manfredi? Marco nodded. And the mayor, too. I saw them together, signing forms. Nonno thinks they're going to mix the fake oil into the communal batch before the festival. If they do that, the whole town's reputation is finished, Lucia finished for him. San Felice had spent decades polishing its DOP certification. One scandal would tarnish every grower within the region. She set the bottle on her kitchen counter and motioned Marco to a chair. "Drink some coffee," she said, her mind already skimming possibilities. If the oil entered the cooperative's tanks, it would be indistinguishable from the real thing, and by the time lab tests caught up, the counterfeit blend would have shipped to restaurants across Europe under the prized San Felice label. Lucia's gaze fell on 2 untouched baskets of olives waiting by the door, her first pick of the day. "Marco, can you handle these rows alone for a little while?" she asked. He squared his shoulders. Of course. Good. I need to visit someone. The someone was Caterina Montorsi, San Felice's librarian, amateur archivist, and Lucia's oldest friend. If there were paper trails to be found, permits, invoices, customs clearances, Caterina could sniff them out faster than a truffle hound in spring. Lucia found her amid tottering piles of municipal records, the air dust-thick and sun-slashed through high windows. "Lou, you look like you swallowed a pit," Caterina said. "Sit, talk." Lucia laid out what she knew, what Marco had witnessed. Caterina listened without interrupting, fingers already dancing across her computer keyboard. "Manfredi has been exporting 3 times as much oil as his groves could produce," she mused, scrolling through customs data. "Funny no one noticed." "Maybe someone did," Lucia said. "Maybe that's why the mayor is involved." Mayor Luigi Venturi had campaigned on promises to boost local agriculture. His billboards still dotted the countryside. Venturi means value. Lucia thought of how readily he posed with farmers during harvest, her calloused hands pressed in his manicured ones, the cameras flashing. Caterina tugged a folder from a shelf and flipped through. Expense ledgers, shipping manifests, certificates of analysis. "Here, look at this." She pointed to a stamp reading "Approved by mayoral decree." He fast-tracked Manfredi's last 3 shipments. No lab tests performed. Lucia exhaled sharply. So the mayor signs off. The co-op unknowingly, or maybe knowingly, mixes counterfeit oil, and Verdeoro sells it at full DOP price. Everyone's pockets get lined. "Except the honest growers and the people who buy it," Caterina said. "And if some reporter gets hold of the story, the whole appellation crashes." Lucia closed her eyes a moment, feeling the weight of generations of farmers. Her grandparents pressing oil in cast-iron pans, her late husband convincing banks to finance a modern mill, balanced on a knife edge. "What do we need?" Caterina asked. "Evidence," Lucia replied. "Something irrefutable we can give the Carabinieri before Friday's festival. Once they inaugurate the communal oil with that ceremonial toast, it's over." Caterina glanced at the wall clock. 48 hours. "Then we'd better move." Their first stop was the cooperative itself, a stone warehouse smelling of wet burlap and young oil. Ernesto, white-moustached and bandy-legged, met them at the loading bay, worry creasing his brow. "I tried locking the drums in my office," he told Lucia, "but the mayor ordered them released. He claims a government inspector cleared the batch." "Did you see any inspector?" Lucia asked. Ernesto shook his head. Only his assistant, Bianchi. Smiled too much, smelled like cologne, not olives. Lucia asked to taste the oil again. Ernesto poured a sample into a small tulip glass. Around them forklifts beeped and workers shouted, oblivious. Lucia warmed the cup between her palms, inhaled twice, and sipped. A pleasant fruitiness sang for half a second before flattening into warm cardboard. She spat into a bucket. "Same counterfeit blend," she said. Ernesto's shoulders sagged. "I knew it in my bones. But what can we do?" "We find the rest of his supply," Lucia answered. She pictured the drums loaded onto trucks, rolling toward the rail depot. If they could intercept them, ideally with the police present, they'd have material proof. But even if they found the drums, the mayor's stamp might outweigh a farmer's accusation, unless they also tied him to a payoff. Caterina tugged at Lucia's sleeve, eyes bright. "Remember the old CCTV on the municipal building? Half the angle covers the co-op's gate. If Venturi or his assistant entered off hours to sign papers, the footage would show it." "Only City Hall staff can access that," Ernesto warned. "Luckily," Caterina said, patting her canvas bag. I volunteer at the archive on Thursdays. My key still works. That night, under a moon as round as a dropped olive, Lucia and Caterina crept up the marble steps of City Hall. San Felice was small enough that no guard patrolled outside, and Caterina's key turned smoothly. They moved through dark corridors still smelling of furniture polish and bureaucratic ennui, then ducked into the records room where a dusty monitor glowed faintly. Caterina clicked through dates. On screen, green-tinted grainy images revealed the co-op gate. Trucks coming, trucks going, Ernesto locking up. At 2:15 a.m. that morning, a sedan nosed into frame. Out stepped Manfredi and Mayor Venturi. His tailored coat collar popped against the cold. They hauled a briefcase from the trunk and disappeared out of view, returning 10 minutes later, lighter and laughing. There, Lucia whispered. Timestamp, faces clear as day. Caterina copied the segment onto a USB stick. Insurance, she said, slipping it into Lucia's coat pocket. But we still need the oil itself, and ideally the money trail. That briefcase, Lucia mused. If only we knew where it went. Maybe we can bait them into revealing it, Caterina said slowly. Lucia arched a brow. How? By threatening to go public. They'll scramble, and in scrambling make mistakes. Lucia winced. A high-stakes gamble. But you have the palate of legend. What better threat than exposing them on the biggest stage? Tomorrow is the pre-festival tasting competition. Judges from Rome, cameras, journalists. Enter a sample from Manfredi's batch, anonymously, then call it out in front of everyone. Lucia pictured the milling hall lined with white-clothed tables, the judges swirling cobalt glasses. Her heart thumped. Public showdowns were not her style. She preferred the slow, decisive snap of pruning shears to courtroom theatrics. Yet the plan had merit. Force the guilty parties to panic, then follow their movements. All right, she said, surprising even herself. But we'll need help. Help arrived in the form of Lieutenant Paolo Gatti of the local Carabinieri. Paolo had grown up pulling clumsy pranks in Lucia's orchards and owed her more than one childhood rescue. When Lucia summoned him, he came. I can't move without grounds, he cautioned after hearing her story. Taste alone isn't evidence. The CCTV helps, but it only proves they met, not what they did. That's why we want you at the competition, Caterina said. When Lucia announces the oil is fake, watch the mayor and Manfredi. Track where they go, who they call. And if we learn where that briefcase is, you can seize it. Paolo scratched his chin. Dangerous, but feasible. Give me one more piece and I'll sign off a warrant. The shipping logs, Lucia said suddenly. Marco mentioned night deliveries. If those logs don't match with customs declarations Caterina pulled, then that's falsification of records, Paolo finished. Ernesto agreed to let them examine the logs stored in the co-op office safe. The next afternoon, Lucia, Caterina, and Paolo gathered in the tiny room smelling of copier ink. The handwritten entries revealed that 20 drums had arrived under serial numbers allocated months earlier to a different grower now deceased. Caterina matched the serials against customs data. The same numbers had been stamped on a shipment that left port 8 weeks ago. Doubled serials, Paolo said, lips tightening. Classic laundering scheme. He photographed every page. Enough for a warrant? Lucia asked. Yes, but we'll keep it quiet until tomorrow. Catching them red-handed will leave no wiggle room. Festival day dawned crisp and honey-coloured. San Felice's central piazza filled with stalls selling cured meats, cheeses, and jars of tomato passata. At the far end, inside the community hall, the pre-festival tasting competition commenced. Lucia wore a plain navy dress and a scarf the shade of oxblood olives, hair pinned under a utilitarian kerchief. She'd entered 2 oils, her own early harvest, and a sample siphoned the previous night from one of Manfredi's suspect drums, labelled merely Lot 17. The judges, 3 bespectacled officials from the National Olive Council, tasted in silence. Outside the curtained area, producers and townsfolk buzzed. Lucia stood near the back with Paolo, who wore civilian clothes and an earpiece connected to officers in an unmarked van. The head judge finally stepped to the microphone. "We award the gold medal to Podere dell'Aurora, sample number 9. Polite applause rippled. Lucia's cheeks warmed, but the moment was not for pride. She stepped forward. "Excuse me, signore," she addressed the judge, amplifying her voice without the mic. "May I speak?" He looked startled but nodded. "There is a sample in this tasting, Lot 17, that is not extra virgin olive oil, but a counterfeit blend containing refined seed oils and chlorophyll coloring. I can demonstrate, if allowed." A hush fell. Cameras pivoted. Mayor Venturi, seated in the front row beside Manfredi, stiffened. The head judge frowned. "That is a grave assertion." Lucia walked to the tasting table, picked up the cobalt glass of Lot 17 and inhaled. A wince crossed her features, exaggerated enough for the audience. She sipped, then coughed theatrically. Notice the absence of polyphenolic bite, the waxy coating. She gestured to the judges. May they retaste? Reluctantly they complied, and their expressions shifted, from confusion to recognition to indignation. "This is indeed defective," one announced into the mic. "How did it pass our pre-screen?" All eyes swung to Manfredi, who began to rise, sweating through his silk jacket. 2 rows behind him, Caterina tracked the mayor. Venturi's hand darted to his phone. Paolo murmured into his earpiece. Suddenly Manfredi bolted for the side exit. Venturi followed. Paolo sprang after them. "Stay with Caterina," he told Lucia. The hall erupted into whispers. Producers crowded Lucia, some thanking her, others furious at the scandal. She edged away, heart hammering but mind clear. The plan had worked. Outside, under banners of fluttering green and white, Paolo tailed the mayor and Manfredi past gelato carts and souvenir stands to the municipal offices. Lucia and Caterina hurried behind at a safe distance. They rounded the corner just as Venturi fumbled keys into the door of his private garage. Paolo signaled his officers. 2 uniformed men emerged from the van, blocking the street. Manfredi cursed and tried to shove Paolo, but decades of farm labor had given the lieutenant a wrestler's strength. He twisted Manfredi's arm and slapped on cuffs. Another officer secured Venturi. Lucia watched, chest tight. "On what grounds?" Venturi spluttered. "Falsification of food products, fraud, corruption," Paolo recited, "and possession of undeclared funds." He nodded toward the garage, where an officer had lifted the door to reveal the briefcase resting atop stacked drums, identical to those at the co-op. The case lay open, brimming with neat bundles of euros. Caterina leaned toward Lucia and whispered, "Irrefutable enough for you?" The official inquiry lasted 3 months. In that time, investigators traced Manfredi's supply chain to a Croatian refinery, uncovered offshore accounts linked to Mayor Venturi, and cleared every innocent member of the cooperative. The news made regional headlines, but thanks to swift action, exports resumed with only a minor dip in confidence. Podere dell'Aurora's oil sold out by Christmas. On a mild February afternoon, Lucia, Caterina, and Paolo gathered on Lucia's veranda, each holding a small glass of freshly bottled oil. The hills were quiet, pruned trees standing like patient soldiers awaiting spring. To truth, Caterina toasted. To perseverance, Paolo added. And to community, Lucia said, meeting their eyes. They drank. Paolo sighed contentedly. You know, the ministry offered me a promotion in Rome for cracking that case, he said. But I turned it down. Too many good reasons to stay. Lucia arched an eyebrow. Like what? He shrugged, cheeks reddening slightly. Like honest farmers who need watching over. Also, I've grown fond of our olive festivals, drama and all. Caterina laughed softly. Careful, Paolino, or you'll end up mayor yourself. Paolo groaned. Per carità, no politics. Leave that to someone purer. Lucia's thoughts flitted to Marco, the young picker who had first brought her the sample. Perhaps the next generation, she mused aloud. Kids who believe taste still matters. She rose, walked to the edge of the veranda, and surveyed the trees. Harvest was months away, but the buds already promised. The wind carried a scent of damp bark and distant time. Behind her, her friends chatted, glasses clinking, sounds of a village that had, for now, righted itself. Lucia closed her eyes, let the flavours of the oil spread across her tongue. Artichoke, almond, a pepper bite. Genuine, uncorrupted, alive. She smiled into the afternoon sun, content to know that sometimes it took only one discerning palate and a few loyal companions to keep an entire world honest.